Despite its many successes and downfalls, the Fallout franchise has always, not you, no, not you, managed to deliver on its storytelling. In this series, I'm going to be discussing the lore of certain locations within the games, alongside their real-world counterparts, or what it is they're referencing, whether it's buildings, books, or even medicines. So grab your favourite snacks, your drinks, get a blanket, and relax as we embark on a journey into some of Fallout's greatest stories. So for me, the most magical thing about the Fallout franchise is its story, its history. You see, Fallout's storyline begins long before the games. It actually shares the same history as us, at least for the most part, until just after the Second World War. After that, life became borderline utopia, at least if you could keep up with the rising inflation rates. If you were able to keep up with this, you would live the perfect life. Robot butlers, white picket fences, everything was amazing. Everything was perfect. At least until...
I love you. Both of you.
We love you too.
Oh my god!
Hold on!
Move faster!
Oh god. Oh god. Oh god.
Welcome, one and all. My name is State vs. J, and this video not only marks the start of me putting up content on YouTube properly, but is also the start of a series where we explore the stories of certain buildings within the Fallout games and their implications between the real world and the Fallout series, and where we explore how the timeline divergence within the games have directly affected the way that the buildings function. Fort Defiance, or rather Allegheny Asylum, is an interesting location not because of its story in Fallout 76, but rather the way that it expresses the timeline divergence between the real world and the Fallout world. So let's start, appropriately, at the beginning. Construction on the asylum began in 1858 and didn't actually finish until 1881. However, the asylum itself started admitting patients in 1864. Initially constructed to follow the Kirkbride plan for more humane treatment of the mentally unwell. Much like many other hospitals at that time, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum began with a noble plan. A plan to treat those who were insane. Back in these times, mental health was not understood the way that it is today. There was no medication. There was no, let's say, cure for the mentally unwell. As such, Kirkbride's plan was a significant step in the right direction for the treatment of mental health. A large part of this plan was to allow for the patients to live in an environment whereby it was tastefully ornamented and the buildings were arranged en echelon, resembling a shallow V. The design allowed for long rambling hallways that provided for sunlight and air to be exposed to the patients and for comfortable living quarters so that the building itself promoted a curative effect. The facilities were also designed to be entirely self-sufficient. As such, farms were allowed, dairies were allowed, and this provided for the patients to be able to do work, in that keeping the mind and body occupied, also allowing for a further therapeutic response. You see, before these hospitals were constructed, the treatment of the mentally unwell was dire. If you were mentally unwell, you were thrown into a prison cell alongside common criminals. You would be chained to a wall, left to freeze, left in your own filth. Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride saw this and wanted to make a change. As such, the Kirkbride plan was formulated. This plan was so successful that it later influenced the construction of over 300 facilities of the same design throughout North America. Sadly, however, this was not sustainable. The Trans-Allegheny Asylum, later named the Western State Hospital, while it began with noble plans, its story soon became sinister. Originally designed to house 250 patients, the hospital had quickly become overrun. By 1880, 717 patients were housed within the asylum. By 1938, there was 1,661, and in 1941, over 1,800. At its peak, in the 1950s, it reached 2,600 patients. This was a dire turn from the Kirkbride plan. Due to the misunderstanding of mental health, additional to those who genuinely were mentally ill, there was also a large proportion of the patients who were admitted that had no mental illness whatsoever. This included, but was not limited to, epileptics, alcoholics, drug addicts, and those who had learning difficulties. This abhorrent misunderstanding of mental health, alongside the overpopulation, meant that proper care was not delivered to these patients, and regrettably, a large number of people had lost their lives within the asylum. In the early 1950s, the hospital had later found itself to be a part of the West Virginia lobotomy project. Now, without going into too much detail, a lobotomy is a procedure for neurological disorders whereby it involves the severing of the connections for the brain's prefrontal cortex. Now, the intent of the lobotomies were to calm down the patient and allow for calmer psychological function, And while that immediate effect did happen, the procedure itself was a mostly fatal encounter. Those who did survive regularly would suffer further cognitive impairments, and as such, the procedure is no longer done today. As if the lobotomies weren't bad enough, patients also had to undergo ice water baths, electroshock therapy, and seclusion cells. This was not treatment. This was torture. Following later developments in the treatment of mental health and a better understanding of what mental health itself is, in the 1980s, the asylum saw a lowered population, and later in 1994, it was shut down. However, even with the lowered population before it was shut down, patients that were deemed to be untreatable were still left locked in cages. The building itself was falling into disrepair. There was a multitude of factors that caused for its foreclosure. However, the building is now open to the public once again. Now used as a museum for the history of mental health and how it's treated, the Allegheny Asylum is used as a tourist attraction. Additional to being a tourist attraction, it is also used for ghost adventures. If you would like to add Allegheny Asylum to your ghost hunting wish list, I will leave the link below to the Trans-Allegheny Asylum website for you to check out. Now to Fallout. In the Fallout universe, it would appear that the asylum never got shut down. This is where the bridge between reality and the Fallout universe connects. As you explore the asylum, you will find that there are skeletons absolutely everywhere. They litter the place. Additional to this, you will find just out of the gates a notice of expulsion alongside a gate guard primer. These notes read, Gate guard primer. Tourists and visitors. The main building is off limits. There is a zero tolerance policy for the following: entering or climbing on the building, defacing the building or graffiti of any kind, prying open or breaking windows, hunting on the park lands. Use your judgment if something seems wrong but isn't on this list. Visitors who fail to comply with this should be ejected from the park. Wild animals. Docile wild animals like deer and beavers, etc. are fine. Leave them alone and don't feed them. Aggressive wild animals should be removed by animal control. They are on the list of important numbers. If that cow shows up again, call Howie. She's always getting out. Former residents. Don't approach them if you can avoid it. Most of them are friendly enough, but you can never be sure. Treat them with dignity and respect and leave them alone until the authorities arrive. Some of them don't realize that the building is closed, and others have nowhere else to go. If you're ever confused or not sure how to handle something, just call my number. It's on the list too. Notice of expulsion. You are hereby given notice to vacate the Allegheny Asylum, effective immediately. Acceptance of this letter legally certifies your acceptance and understanding of the letter. If you fail to accept relocation, you may be imprisoned by local authorities. Failure to accept relocation includes remaining in your room past midnight tonight. If you have an emergency contact on file, they were notified of your expulsion and may be on hand to pick you up. You may wait for them outside of a fence until midnight. After midnight, your continued presence will be considered failure to vacate the premises. Please refrain from causing damage to the premises as you leave. Legal action will be pursued and you may be sued for the damages. If you have any possessions in your room, they must be removed at the time of your expulsion, or they will be considered forfeit and destroyed. Our staff will not be present to help you carry belongings. Thank you for staying with us at Allegheny Asylum. Mr. Benjamin Yates Rutledge, Hospital Administrator. While you're exploring the asylum, you will run into 3 separate sets of notes. One before the war, how the asylum was ran through 2 incident reports. One immediately after the war, with a survivor detailing some accounts of her stay within the asylum, and one from the Brotherhood of Steel. We will not be focusing on the Brotherhood in this video, as that will be saved for a later one. As you enter the asylum, if you turn immediately right, there's an office with one survivor still located in there. But if you look on the desk, there is a tape called Staff Incident Report. This is what it says.
Hospital Incident Report, resident psychiatrist, Dr. Kessel. One of the junior nurses has suffered a nervous breakdown. His assignments included patient 5A3, whose afflictions manifest in habitual self-harm. Patient 5A4, who, while not violent, does aggressively grab and paw at whoever is trying to administer care. And also patient 5B7, who breaks down into loud, unconsolable fits of crying with no apparent cause or trigger. That, and the constant attention and sanitary cleanup required throughout the day for all of his charges, was too much for the others. We found him standing outside the door to one of the patient's rooms carrying a tray of food, but not moving anywhere. One of the other nurses noticed he'd been standing in place for over an hour. When he finally responded to our attempts to get his attention, he seemed surprised that any time had passed. During our exit interview, he broke into tears. He wanted to know if something was wrong with him, if he would end up here as a patient. I explained that nervous exhaustion was a common ailment, especially for hospital workers. Maybe after some months of rest, he could reapply for his job. That didn't seem to console him.
In a secluded area of the ground floor on the right side, which you can only get to by going upstairs and through a collapsed floor, you will find the second holotape, the hospital report, violent incident. This is what it says.
Hospital Incident Report. Resident Psychiatrist Dr. Kessel. We had a fight break out today. All the patients in the dining room area for the morning meal and all the attending staff were present. Patient 3E2 has never had any problems with violence, but can be verbally abusive to whoever happens to be in the area. The staff intervened. Patient 3E2 broke free from restraint by biting into one of the nurse's hands. Another nurse and I chased her down the hallway while the rest of the staff tried to contain the patients in the dining room who were obviously agitated by what just happened. We were finally able to hold her and administer a sedative, and the unfortunate nurse whose hand had been torn open received treatment. All the other patients have returned to their routines, but patient 3E2 and 7C1 will need to be monitored in case this is the start of habitual violent behavior. The prognosis for either of them being released has slipped even further into statistical irrelevancy.
The notes that you will find from the survivor immediately post-war are all backwards in chronology. So you will find the latest note first. Now I will read the notes backwards so that you can get the full chronology of the notes. Clara Duran's notes 1177. It reads, "It's hard to believe that I was going to be taking my students here on a field trip before everything went nuts. I'm so very thankful that I read up on this place and was able to make it here along with other refugees. Watoga is lost. We can't go back while the robots are running amok. The little bog towns and farms in the countryside wouldn't be able to sustain us the way this place can. Allegheny Asylum has everything that we need in order to really make a go of it, but there's so much work ahead of us." Priority list. Find a working terminal or repair a broken one. Water treatment facility is having problems and may need to get another thorough cleaning. Keep the coal coming. It's gonna be winter really soon. Get each survivor a room with a bed, coal burner, and adequate shelter. Organize volunteers to teach some of my fellow Watogans how to cook. Find where the darn roaches are coming from and seal it off. Organize scouting groups for different kinds of supplies, especially seeds. Get the kids sorting scrap. Try to catch that weird looking cow if it comes back. This place has a dairy, so let's use it. Other things that we really need to work on is just getting along with each other. In the office that note was just outside of is another. Clara Duran's notes, 1277, written a month after. This is what it reads. "We caught the cow. We had a vote to pick a name for her, which was a good social exercise. I didn't expect it to become quite so heated though. I guess some folks get worked up over anything. Anyway, her name is Bertha. Some aggressive dogs had Bertha stuck in an empty fountain. Poor thing. We had to kill them just to get to her. I guess we all get to see what dog tastes like now. I'm not excited, but it can't be worse than canned dog food. Priority list." And then it gets cut off. Immediately on the top floor, as you enter, if you carry on alongside where you find the hole, you'll find the next note. Clara Duran's notes, 178. It reads, "Saffron fell through some floorboards while scouting on the second floor and sprained her ankle. All things considered, we lucked out. It could have been much worse. Just close up that area for now. Priority list. Need more coal. Get more rooms for survivors. Keep training Watogans on the basics. Send scouting groups to look at nearby farms for supplies and survivors. We need more seeds, and we have plenty of chems to trade." Someone mentioned that they saw some chickens on a foraging run. They'd go great with Bertha in the barn. Milk, eggs, and grain would go a long way to sustain us. Sometimes these folks remind me of my students on a bad day. Cliques are threatening to split from a group, and we need to stop all the little personal insults and jibes if we're gonna have a chance of revitalizing this place enough to really make a life here. I'm hopeful despite it all. Without hope, what would be the point of carrying on? Lastly, we find the final note. Clara Duran's note 378. And you'll find this breaks a chronology a little bit. The previous notes were all a month in between. This one is 2 months. And this is the last correspondence that we get from Clara. It reads, "Our group was attacked by desperate folks who weren't interested in trading with or joining our collective. Such senseless violence. They killed Bertha, even though I showed them that she was a milk cow, and all the egg-laying chickens too. Half the remaining group left for Monongah, saying that they couldn't continue to carry the survivors from Watoga. They warned us not to follow. Those of us who are left are abandoning Allegheny tomorrow. The people who attacked us will just be back for more eventually. I think they're from that little town north of Watoga, where I bought preserves and antiques. So we're gonna try and find survivors up north near Harper's Ferry. It's a long walk, but hopefully we can find other good people or just avoid the bad ones." So let's recap. So following the stories of the holotapes, it would appear as though the asylum never got shut down. Instead, it would appear that the treatment of the patients had actually improved to the point that the asylum was functioning the way that an asylum should. Patients appeared to be treated with a lot more dignity and respect in the time leading up to the bombs. That said, While the asylum was still a functioning asylum, it would also appear as though it was open to the public for touring, or at least for students to tour. That may have been just for educational purposes, or even for recreational purposes. It is never clearly stated. It would also seem that Clara was one of the first people to see the effects of radiation on cows, and was one of the first people to have actually seen what we would later know as Brahmin. Additional to this, judging by the direction that she stated that the attackers came from, it would also appear as though they came from the abandoned bog town, an area of which appears to have also suffered a tragic ending. Littered with super mutants, the abandoned bog town is, as its name suggests, abandoned. With that said, we don't see any more correspondence from Clara or any of the other survivors around the asylum. Did she find what she was looking for in Harper's Ferry? Or was that yet another tragic mistake? It would appear as though everywhere that the survivors turned, bad luck would follow. And there are still so many mysteries left yet to explore. So many questions left unanswered. What happened to Clara? What happened to the survivors that went to Monongah? What happened to Harper's Ferry? How did a Coke machine end up in a goddamn toilet stall? Why do Scorched frequent the area of the asylum? For some of these questions, we may never get an answer, and all we can pray for is that the souls lost in the asylum can rest in peace. And while this chapter might be closed for the asylum, there are still many pages to read through, many stories to unfold, and while we may turn our back on the asylum today, our story here is not finished. Where will we go to next? There's only one way to find out. Tune in again soon and find out where the story leads to. My name is State vs. J, and this has been Allegheny Asylum. Thank you all, and good night. P.S. Congratulations! You're at the end of a video. Now if you made it this far, you are a fucking trooper, and I love you for it. But there are many other ways that you can support me. I also stream over on Twitch, and I try to follow some semblance of schedule over there, although there's never any promises. Additional to that, I also sometimes post content over on TikTok, so left below are the links for those socials. You should check them out. I feel like you're going to have a lot of fun. Good night, everyone.